Recycling. We all do it. We all assume that it's helpful, but but hardly any of us think about what actually happens to the stuff that we recycle and how different the various natural resources are that we recycle, and what sort of benefit it might be. I just assume that if it's recycling, then it's good and it's helping something. But I think there are very different types of recycling based on the different types of materials that we have, some of which are much, much more worth recycling than others. And some seem to me to be positively harmful to recycle them, which is paper, ironically enough, because people think that they're saving trees by recycling paper. So, well, here's one that's neutral. Recycling glass. I'm not sure what this does exactly, because glass is made from sand, silicon dioxide. It doesn't seem to me like we're in any danger of running out of that, like, ever. So, recycling glass, well, melt it down, use it for something else. Probably about the same amount of energy it takes to melt down sand, make it into glass, make it into something. I don't know, it doesn't seem to do that much, so I wouldn't bother with it. Here's one type of recycling that is helpful: aluminum. Aluminum recycling is very worthwhile, from what I understand. Aluminum is actually one of the most abundant metals. It is the most abundant metal in the Earth's crust. It's not as if we're going to run out of it soon, but it only appears in the form of an ore called bauxite, aluminum oxide, and it takes energy, a lot of energy input, to put into bauxite to get out the aluminum metal from that. The aluminum oxide has aluminum in its 3+ oxidated state, and you have to punch electrons into that to make it into its neutral metallic state. And I've read somewhere that fully 1% of the world's total energy output goes towards purifying bauxite into aluminum. So that's a significant energy expenditure. And when you recycle aluminum, I've also read if you recycle one aluminum can, it saves enough electricity to power a TV for 4 hours. So recycling aluminum, that seems to be a paradigm case of worthwhile recycling. Okay, now to paper. Now, I really can't understand why recycling paper is anything but harmful. Well, here's why it's not helpful. People think they're saving trees and whatnot by recycling paper. But look, trees are a renewable resource. They're not going anywhere. And the timber companies, they have a vested interest in making sure that their tree harvesting that they do for paper, etc., is sustainable. That is, they have a vested interest in making sure that they don't plant trees, that they don't harvest trees faster than they plant them. Okay, so that's not going anywhere. Trees are a renewable resource, so recycling paper, at least that seems to indicate that it's really not necessary. Now here's where it's actually harmful. Arguably it's actually harmful to recycle paper because it takes so much water and generates so much chemical waste to regenerate pulp out of paper with lots of ink on it. That takes some doing, and it generates a lot of, as I said, chemical waste, takes a lot of water. I really don't see how that's preferable to harvesting trees that are grown for that purpose and that are going to be planted at least the same rate that they're harvested. So here's another thing. With regard to global warming and the CO2 levels in the atmosphere, if you take so never mind all the stuff about chemical waste and water, not recycling paper can actually help the environment, regardless of everything I've just said. If you think about it, throwing away paper into into a landfill where it ends up in a landfill, that ends up as a carbon sink. A landfill, paper that ends up in a landfill, the landfill is a carbon sink, so that carbon is not going anywhere. The carbon in paper came from carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. That's what trees and plants do. They take out carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. That's why it's good to have trees and plants, and why their depletion is bad news for the environment. But of course, trees being harvested for paper is not bad news, because the same amount at least is going to get planted. But if you throw away paper, that acts as a carbon sink. That carbon is not going back into the environment. It's not going to get burned and turned back into carbon dioxide. So trees pull carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. And then if you throw the paper away, that carbon's going into the ground. It's not going to become carbon dioxide again, which is a greenhouse gas. So the upshot is, throwing away paper can take away and not recycling paper, and instead preferentially growing new trees, as the lumber industry has a vested interest to do, so that they can keep the profits going. They don't want to go out of business, so they want to keep planting trees. That keeps that demand going for the trees to be planted, and that keeps the carbon dioxide coming out of the atmosphere and going into the ground as a carbon sink, where the carbon's not going to go back into the atmosphere. So not recycling paper in more ways than one. There's the independently of each other. You got the fact that it comes out of the it's pulling carbon dioxide out of the air and putting it into the ground. That's good, because we probably have too much carbon dioxide if we have global warming, etc. Too much deforestation in other areas of the world. Then if we keep planting trees to harvest them, then we're taking carbon dioxide out of the air. And then independently of that, there's just the fact, as I mentioned, you have a great deal of water that's used, and chemical waste that's produced just by the recycling of paper. So those are two independent reasons not to recycle paper, and instead go ahead and saw down those trees, because where they are going to get used, another one will take its place, and that is good news for the environment in more ways than one. If someone can explain to me why recycling paper is actually useful, I'll be glad to hear it. But so far, that's all I can figure out for right now. Thanks.